Dr. Power?
Oh.
Yes, I've arrived.
Thanks, Bonnycastle, once again. Hi, folks. Come on in. Good to see so many of you today. Yeah, one more over here. Good. Well, I'm glad you took time to join us. This is the second last week. Interesting. My time is flying. Have to say how much I've enjoyed the course. Certainly the papers, a whole batch arrived in on Monday night and so over the weekend, and some coming in tonight, Monday night. So we'll be working on those, and my very best to get them done. 80 papers, at least an hour a paper, I'll get them done over the next 15, 16 days. So it'll be nip and tuck, but you'll have them before your exams. You have a chance to get a format, a sense of what could have been added, and in far more detail than what I expect from you on the exam. But I do want you to have that in your hands to prep for the exam. So I'll get it done. I'll be working at it. Interesting things in the paper today. Just little side things I've noticed is that the story in Greece hasn't gone away. Greece has got coming up about $2.3 billion it has to pay back to the EU in July of this year, and they have no funds to do this. The whole thing is starting to fracture and fall apart over there. Increasing tensions between between political parties within Greece itself. The immigration has not eased the tension. In fact, it's exacerbated the problem in Macedonia and places like that where the immigrants are coming in. It really is a bad situation going on. And some reports that Greece needs at least $50 billion. Keep in mind, Greece is only the size of Ontario. It needs $50 billion just to reset and get back on side. And right now, Merkel and the IMF and other European nations are looking at, again, another bailout. You recall they did one within the last year. Another bailout to keep moving them along. But now that's all fraught with dangers, because what you have is with the Brits talking about leaving the European Union, and the IMF's looking at that, and the IMF is one of the principal funders for this thing for Greece. They're twitchy about putting money on the table to know exactly what the configuration is of the European Union, and so the whole thing is out of whack and out of tune, out of alignment. We're going to have to watch that, as it has some impact on us and how we do business as we move forward. So in the paper today, let's see, we have starting. Well, the big story here, of course, is Fort McMurray in northern Alberta. It's a tragedy. It's 80,000 people forced out of their homes by this fire, and some with little or no notice. Some of the cars, as they drive up the highways, are overheating. I've heard reports, and they have to get out of the cars and keep moving. Some are running out of gas because they were directed north because they couldn't get south in large part. And so it's just a tragedy out there, but it speaks to us as strategists on the needs of thinking about pandemics, a solar flare, something that causes that sort of situation. Do you have an earthquake kit at home? Within your office, do you have a fan-out system? Are you able to sustain yourself? Because there's no help for these folks. They left. How many even had an earthquake kit to throw in the car that had some water in it? There's no water north of Fort McMurray in any large sense. Bathrooms and foods and drugstores have blood pressure pills like I take. Where are they going to get them? And when I say they're on their own, they're certainly doing what they can, but there's no great line of support. And more stories fall out of that. I mean, the idea of the whole town is going to be significantly impacted and destroyed, and it leads to whether or not the force majeure clause in insurance policies, will these homes be rebuilt? And will it impact certain insurance companies, or will they be protected under the clauses? And without seeing the contracts, I don't know, but there are certainly some issues there. The bombing folks that are coming in and dropping off the chemicals are doing extremely well, a great stock to buy. But there's all sorts of stuff as strategists. We can look at this ecosystem that's shifting dramatically and daily, that we should consider how we can accommodate and how we can exploit opportunities and mitigate the damage it's going to present. Certainly if some of those insurance companies, and if they're responsible, they say they may be able to get out of the clause on a force majeure situation, but if they can't get out of the contracts, those insurance companies, it's going to be quite a significant bill. And if that's the case, most of those are probably held by your pension plans, and it's going to impact you in that way. So it's certainly a lesson for us to be self-sufficient for a number of days and rely upon yourself and get ready for it. One of the things we've done in our family is we have in London, Ontario, a good friend of mine, Dave Martin, and he's our contact. So if our family is balkanized in different places, when the big earthquake off our coast, which is promised, arrives where we are, we can always call Dave in Ontario, and that's our contact point. So you may want to consider something like that. Certainly Donald Trump walked through it and come out the other side. he's there, he's your person, and now we might see a softer, gentle Donald as he moves towards the finish line. He's got a completely different marketing strategy now to sell himself. He better put it in place as he goes out to the general population to make it happen. Certainly the GOP establishment that we've been referred to, I think, will have little choice but to get in behind, because the last thing they want to see is the Supreme Court in the States become hard left and other things. So they'll do their best to get him elected, and he's there. And the wild card in all this, of course, is Hillary, whether or not she'll be indicted. And there's a possibility that may happen. We haven't got much farther to go for the shoes drop, and we'll know. I mean, all the aides have been interviewed and investigated by the FBI, etc. And the last one to be investigated, now they got the facts and story straight, is to talk to her and see where it falls. But if she was to be indicted, Donald walks to the finish line, and he is your president. And so what for us is that as a nationalist, possibly in some sense an isolationist, as a tough-minded individual who wants us to pay our own fair share, what impact will that have on NAFTA and on Canada and your business and my business, and even on the tax system? Although he has not talked in terms of flat tax, I suspect he's going to have something to say about that. So let's watch and see what Donald does as he moves towards the finish line. In Quebec, we have that old thing bubbling up again, that stores like Walmart and other English brands, there's a new law going through in Quebec that's going to make these folks required to have some French on their signs outside, and though they don't have to take the name Walmart and make it French, but there has to be some more French on their signs to align with the new French signage laws. And that, of course, is a double-edged sword, is that in the past, when you approach these large national chains and say you have to rebadge and make a fresh sign and all the cost entailed, sometimes they say it's just not worth the effort for the 6 million people in a sea of almost 400 million people. We don't need that 6 million market. We'll just let it go and not do the changing and leave the province. It's a possibility. I doubt it, but it's a possibility. But the other side, you have to have some empathy for our French-Canadian colleagues, that they are that little island in the sea of Anglophones, and they feel threatened. And the fundamentalists, when we go in there with much music and Levi jeans and American television and the English language, you can understand the sense that the traditionalist French are trying to preserve their heritage and their way of life and what's of value to them. And so it's the same thing we see in the Middle East and other places when you see this clash of civilizations. That's what's happening here, is that we have the Anglophones and the Francophones clashing a little bit. And so this English sign law, I hope it doesn't get too far out of hand, but certainly is a concern, and whether it's good or a bad thing. We had a little discussion on that this week. The spokeswoman for the RCMP has held a little conference. Guilford's name, Galliford, and she's one of the female Mounties who's made allegations about harassment that she's been facing and brought a suit. And again, we could talk a bit about that. The culture has shifted, and being an old fart, I'm one of those that stumbles with this all the time, because when I grew up, it was a different time, and we opened doors for women, and we commented with a nice hairdo or a nice dress. Nothing more sinister than that. It was just meant to be a compliment, and today, of course, if I say those things, then it's sexual harassment, and I'm for the high jump. And it's hard for old dogs to change, and the culture changes very slowly. It has to change, there's no question about it. But increasingly, the sexual harassment comes to play in the workforce, and it's something we have to be aware of and raise the awareness and appreciation for it, and fight against it as to what's appropriate. And I guess if I could poke the bear a little bit, I'm just wondering at times, has it gone a little too far? Has the pendulum swung just a little too far in that regard? Is there some room for old farts as well in this organization to still live within the bounds, but still say some of the things that maybe we used to say? It's very uncomfortable. It's difficult to find that right terrain to stand on. But I'd like to have a little conversation today and help educate me. I think that's a good thing to do. And certainly, in the past, I've been an offender. I've said open doors and said good things, and maybe shouldn't have. Tax schemes. Increasingly, Canada Revenue is clamping down on tax folks in Canada, trying to harness more revenues, and tax havens, Delaware, and Nevada and the States are still tax havens, but there's other tax havens, and we're trying to close them all down. But now they've hired another, talked this the other week, $444 million in new federal budgets put aside for more tax enforcement by the Revenue Canada to wring some more pennies out of us. And one of the things they're doing here is they're now jumping on KPMG, who've been in the past, and they've had good legal advice, saying it was an appropriate thing to do. In the past, they helped us set up our places offshore and our tax havens and our accounts, thinking that it was within the bounds. If you set it up this way, you're entitled to do it. In fact, when I did law, I recall doing it for a client, and no secret, I used the Canadian Imperial Bank of Commerce in the Cayman Islands, and it was simply a matter of a phone call from me to the Cayman Island Canadian Imperial Bank of Commerce, and they had a lawyer in-house upstairs that put the company together, and we wired funds down, and the company set up, and that was years and years ago. But it's all that is today is being looked at and scrutinized, and what the individual does at the other end on declaring income tax and things, that becomes their issue. But here they talk in terms that KPMG in 1999 alone moved they charged a $100,000 fee for the number of people. 27 individuals took advantage of this, and they paid KPMG $100,000 for setting them up. And on the Isle of Man, they set up their accounts. Well, now it's taboo and being looked at, and then you get the question of lawyers and to some extent accountants, but certainly lawyers have this privilege that whatever goes on in our offices stays in our offices, and pretty difficult to wring it out of us. But of course, the KPMG, and this is a situation where they're digging in and going back through it. Wynne MPs face allegations of sexual harassment again. We just talked about. Kathleen Wynne says at least two of her MPs have been known to run afoul of this and are being dealt with. Auditor General talks about citizenship fraud prevention, that there's over 700 backlog cases. One application had 50 applicants used the same address as their place, but it was not picked up. And so the Auditor General is saying we've got to be more effective and more efficient on looking at these applications for immigration permits, that they're not being well looked at. Over here we have, the long-term census is coming in. Fortunately, we got ours the other day. It was a small little one. But the long-form census is 25% of you out there are going to get one. It takes quite a while to fill in. Harper, to his credit, did away with it, and the new government wants to put it back in place. And the question I have for you today is, how do you feel about a stranger government coming into your home and going through your mail and through your drawers in your bedroom, like a search warrant thing, and searching every corner and looking at the dust balls and things of that nature, and your phones, your mail? Well, that's what's happening here, is that we are allowing government increasingly to monitor through the Canada Anti-Terrorism Act, like the Patriot Act in the States. They're rummaging through all your stuff, all your materials, day in, day out, day night, and compiling files. And are we concerned about civil liberties? Are we concerned about that? This is just another example, these long forms back again, to get that information. To me, it's prying, it's getting data, they're going to sell it to marketeers, etc. And I'm not sure they need all that information. I understand some information is needed to apportion the tax credits between provinces to adjust for the have and have-not provinces. But I just wonder if we're not going a little bit too far, and are the long-form tax census forms a good or a bad thing, or is it just Big Brother looking more into our souls, and we don't want them there? Big spread today on lead poisoning, Chicago, lots of talk, I'm sure you're aware of it, the old lead pipes and what to do about it, and the infrastructure costs that are related to that to fix the problem are astronomical. Again, the more money than they have to make this all come, but the trade-off is people are dying because they're not doing it. It was interesting here, the Anglican Church, Colin Johnson, Archbishop of Toronto, Diocese of Toronto, from the Anglican side, came out and gave the Catholics a bit of a slap around, good for him. He said the Anglican Church has ponied up theirs $12.9 million to compensate survivors of these schools, and they've also got a further $2.8 million set aside. And you recall that the best the Catholics could do across all of Canada with the power and the strength and the resources was something in the order, if my memory serves me correct, it was some some low number like $3.8 million out of a total of $25 million that we promised we would pay. And so at least the Anglican Church have poked the bear a little bit, and more power to them. Certainly, I think there's a growing embarrassment within the Catholic Church to do the right thing. The two trade deals are in limbo. This is the one to the Pacific and one to the European Union. Both are under review. And I guess we've talked a bit about this in the class, the TPP, etc. That the problem with these is that they were negotiated behind closed doors. You were never given an executive summary, even a high-level summary, saying, here's what's in it. You were never asked what your thoughts are about this. And these are major, major implications. And it's done in a big, big secret way. And they're getting ready to sign off on this stuff, and yet we still, as a Canadian, you don't know what the impact will be on your business, your industry, your sector. And I'm not comfortable with that. This globalization that's taken place, there's this new world order that's falling into place, these new universal regulations with new universal adjudication boards of increasing in number as it grows. My impression is they're all set up in favor of big business, that it's the large, big farmers and things that are driving this energy and getting these agreements in place to help them in big business. But I'm not sure it's necessarily in your best interest or my best interest. But without the facts, it's hard for us to say. But we might look a little deeper today to the extent we can find some information on the two trade deals and what's in them and what dangers does it present, and are you happy with them? In our province in BC, about close to 20 years ago, 1997. In 1997, there was a very tragic situation occurred. A young girl, 14 years old, was sort of gang bullied by a bunch of other girls and beaten and shoved and eventually held her head underwater and drowned. Her name was Virk. And a sad tragedy was well written up here in the city of Victoria where it took place. But it was just pure student bullying, a teenager, 14, by a bunch of 15 to 16 years old. Kelly Illard, who was one of the principals, she was accused of participating in the killing. She's still in jail. She's been there now for about 17 years. She's applied for parole, did not get it this time round for second-degree murder. She's now 33. A tragedy for both families. It doesn't make it easy. But I guess what I want to talk about a little bit is about the bullying that goes on in our schools and for youngsters and on the internet and things. So maybe we should raise our awareness for that this week and be a little more proactive and be prepared to speak up. Do something. You have a duty to speak up and protect. And so let's do that. Tension heats up. The Premiers Conference are getting ready for the four Western Premiers to get together. Manitoba's Premier, the new one, is 6'8" tall, I think, and Notley is a little woman, 5'2". And so there's going to be some great pictures of Notley and the Manitoba Premier side by side. But more importantly, is Notley's on a wing by herself as NDP. The others tend to be more to the right wing, and so philosophically there's some strong disagreements. And I suspect when they get together there'll be some of those clashes of political ideology come to place that we'll be looking for. BC doing a poor job monitoring the mining industry on what's going on. How close do we have to watch these folks? And a good comment. And the second part of the paper, gold continues to go up. I think most people think the 1,300 is sort of a mental plateau. Once we break through 1,300, if it continues, then we may see this move up a little higher. Gold is settling back to about 43 and change. Our dollar is 78, and I think today I heard it was going down to 77, so it's easing off. But interestingly here is that the banks' oil loans, in fact, the whole oil industry, the banks have supported over the years with their oil loans and lines of credit and things or another. They're desperately trying to get back on side and make provision for reserves. And the smaller banks like Canadian Western Bank have just significantly increased their reserves for what they're about to face. And Canada's doing the same thing. They're beefing up their hedging position because they see some situations out there that they want to make sure they can capture the price today by hedging. That's the ability to sell their product today at a fixed price for delivery someday in the future. And that's what they're doing to lock in, so at least they know what they've got, as opposed to the surprise of oil going back, say, to $20 a barrel. it would be quite a disaster. I mean, they're rolling the dice. Oil could go up to $80 a barrel, and by hedging it, they're locked in to sell it for that price when the time comes. And so, but they're locking in the high 40s, $50 range. Some month how far out. 2017. So they're kind of locked out to 2017 for the next year. They think $50 a barrel would be a good price. They're happy to take it at that, and so they're selling their oil today at $50 for delivery against that date. And whether they win or not, we'll see what happens. If the if the oil settles back down to $35, they're a winner. They've got a fall in premium. If the stock goes past 50, then they could have done better. But the point is, it gives a sense of the tension and the difficulties in planning around what's going on in Alberta and the other prairie provinces right now with oil and gas and the banks and the implications who's impacted by that. Again, if the banks are getting ready to sustain some significant debt problems and bad loans, that's going to impact again on your pensions, because I suspect a lot of bank shares are in your company, in your pension plans. Alberta's beef, that was an interesting story. Earl's, one of the large Canadian restaurant chains, had to have certified humane labeled beef, and the only place to get enough to satisfy Earl's nationally was to go to the States to buy the beef. So here we have this Canadian company buying American beef and won't take Alberta beef, and so you can feel the tension that's rising up. Particularly Alberta doesn't need any more bad news, and they went through this about 10 or 15 years ago, maybe a little less than that, on the mad cow disease, the same sort of thing, boycotts. And my understanding, my readings tell me that it's not a big deal to get the certified humane standards. I think many of our own producers will get this. It's just a matter of the application process to go through it. So we should have it, and maybe it's a wake-up call. And I certainly support the idea of humane treatment for animals. And all too often these plants are not as humane as they should be. And so I'm a supporter of that. I think it should happen. And then I hope Earl's comes back to us as soon as they can. And we can supply the same products here in Canada. It may be a good motivator for us to do the right thing. TransAlberta is doing something, trying to talk in terms of the coal phase-out. Notley has insisted that they close down some of the coal facilities in Alberta. So 12 of Alberta's 18 coal-fired plants are going to be closed down by 2030. And so that has an impact on coal miners and coal and trains that take it back and forth. And so therefore the question becomes repositioning and what to spend that money on. But it also speaks to, doesn't it, the alternative energy we've been talking about coming on, the idea of fossil fuels and what's the future for those folks. Well, this is just another indication that as far as coal is concerned, it's on the downside. On this continent, I think it's fair to say, certainly Obama's done the same thing in the States and big time, and so the coal demand is lessening as we go through it. What else? Vehicle sales, large, and the cars that are large are light trucks are leading the way, while cars are dropping in the percentage of the sales. But the total monthly sales in last month in April were 200,000 cars. It was the first time. I don't know how we'd forecast. Economically, I have a sense that Canada's economy doesn't warrant that sort of an upsurge in buying cars, but there's some reason for it. WestJet boosted WestJet's profits because of oil, and 25% of their energy comes from oil to fly their planes, and so WestJet, and I imagine Canadian Airlines, Air Canada will be doing exactly the same thing, doing well because of the price of oil, that they're a winner. Housing costs continue to rise. Innovation, there's an article in here about sustainable economy and the need for entrepreneurs and innovators and the greatest natural resources, according to this article. What we talked about in this class, we've said the two key things for nations are entrepreneurship and innovation. And this whole article is about the need for us to do more along that lines and to support and help build. Offshore wind farm boom eyed. And here they're talking about building capacity, and the Americans are going to put another $10 billion in building off the Atlantic coast wind power. And they've got the chart here, and I'm looking at it, that today, as I look at it, Britain has about 51% of the wind power. today as we speak. Canada's not even on the map. And under construction, Germany and China and the Netherlands and Britain. Those 4 countries account for almost all the new construction under construction. And certainly now America is making a big jump in that field with a $10 billion expenditure. But again, it speaks to the tipping point will be reached on fossil fuels. This stuff comes on stream and coal goes down and solar and wind come up. We're right in the middle of this exciting time. The Tesla car, well, the stock price has been dropping recently. I've been watching it. And remember we talked about that $35,000 Tesla car coming out. Certainly I enjoy what Tesla is doing. I enjoy the batteries, etc., etc. But increasingly their expenditures are outracing their revenues and what they're doing on all these new projects, this new innovation that we all support and love to see. They're going to outrun the resources. It's like a military thing that they're doing so well on the tanks and the infantry rushing down the road that the supply chain trying to come up behind them is going to get very thin and break. And my sense for Tesla, if they don't slow down or don't improve the supply chain, get some funding and some banking, they could hit the wall financially, which would be a shame because they've got so much to offer. Great little story here on small business. Christopher Kessling, he takes containers in Vancouver and with a whole kit inside, gives you all the pieces you need, ships you a container and all the bits and pieces for $40,000, and he builds these lovely little homes with sliding glass doors out of the container, and sometimes they're 2-story, put another container on the roof, and you get these bits and pieces, and for $40,000 you've got a home, and some can be off the grid with a solar power panel, and composting toilets, and so you're completely off the grid, and so he's starting to pick up and take some money. The problem, of course, is that as a small entrepreneur, he finds it difficult to get some mortgages to back these, because the conventional mortgage thinking is that it's the old mental model that unless the building sits and is locked into the ground somehow on a foundation, then we can't give you a mortgage. And of course, I think increasingly as the 3D printing of homes and things comes to bear, they're going to have to review their thought process as to what's a home. But interesting story. Self-driving cars, now this story continues today. In 2017, a year down the road, Volvo expects to have a license to be driving through London on a regular basis to check it out. They promise more safety and insurance rates going down, and they'll cut down, they say also cut down the number of automobiles needed and sold. And of course that's true, as well as the insurance rates should fall. Certainly if we can have those little pods we're talking about. We're on the cusp of this. It's not going to take that long. Monetary policy is bullish for gold, and I think it's a race to a safe haven. If the U.S. dollar and U.S. currency is slowing down, the U.S. economy is slowing down, which it is, I think gold is where people are going to be heading for. So it's a good little story. The loonie is settling in a little bit. Business owners, Syria, refugees. Nice story here about employment is that in Calgary, folks are trying to make jobs for the Syrians to come in and do some work, and I'm pleased for that. It's nice to give them a hand up and make it happen. I have to wonder if I can about the, back to the, triggers my thought to the 80,000 people up north. Canada's military is our insurance policy, and it seems to me we're underinsured. We have right now about 13,000 reservists. We have the vacancies for more, but all we have across all of Canada is about 13,000 reservists, part-time soldiers that work, but you can call out for situations like this. And our military, of course, is stripped, that we don't have an awful lot of boots and rifles and things, nor equipment. But this is the time when we've got 80,000 people moving up a highway. They need those basic rations, water supplies, medical treatment, showers, bathrooms, etc. And this is the role normally that the military could play, that they can be called out, much like the National Guard in the States. And this is the duty of government. Government's first duty is to protect us and take care of us. And in that regard, I'm not going to go spying on us, but in the sense of protecting us from these sort of things, we should have the resources. And we don't have those water tankers and cars and facilities and hospital things that can go up there and set up a triage unit along the highways and things. So we're a little bit underinsured. So is the military at the right level for you? Let's talk about that too. folks, I guess that's everything I want to talk about today. The dance is almost over, and we'll talk to you next week. Bye-bye now.